When I asked our next storyteller, what makes you a character, he said, I'm a character because I've never learned how to say no. Interesting. See you at the after party. Ladies and gentlemen, Academy Award winner Dustin Lance Black.
Oh boy, you know, I'm a writer, so I usually write things down and have note cards. I see you have note cards, but we're not allowed any tonight, so I'm gonna do my best here. You know, kind of like Greg, I don't know if it's a gay guy thing. When I get down, and I did get a little bit down a couple of weeks ago, I have a little recipe for that. And it starts with me going down to the grocery store, and I head over to get some wine, my favorite wine, and then I go get some Hershey's syrup, and then I go and get some ice cream and some Lactaid. Yeah. And I head right over to the cashier, and I've seen this cashier forever. We've just never said a word to each other, and I'm just waiting for him to ring me up, and all of a sudden he decides he's going to strike up a conversation. He's looking at what I'm getting, and he's like, oh, wow, dude, you know, looks like a romantic evening you got planned here. Yeah, who's the lucky girl? I'm like, really? Do I have to do this? Can't I just go home and get a little bit drunk? Or do I have to sit here and I have to come out to you right now? And it's the thing that gay and lesbian people have to do their whole lives. You have to consistently, constantly come out, daily come out, because so many of us aren't, you know, immediately identifiable. And it's the oldest gay and lesbian story there is. If you go to a film festival, a gay and lesbian film festival, it's coming out stories. If you go to a bookstore, it's coming out stories. It's sort of tired, actually. It might be even overdone. The thing is I've never told mine. And you might be thinking, well, you just said you have to come out every day, so wouldn't you have hundreds? And yeah, that's true, except there's always that one. There's that one where you have the most at stake, the one that you're most worried about how it's going to go. And for me, that happened right over the Christmas break in 1996, and I flew home from college, and I came out to my mother. Now, my mom, I love my mom, but my mom is a good Mormon mother, right? And she's a good Mormon mother who lives in Texas. That's where we grew up, in Texas. And so if you're a Mormon and you're in Texas, it means you're a part of the Randolph Ward. And that means you're very, very far from the prophet of the church. But on special Sundays, you go to church and they lower the video screen. Now, this is in the 80s and I'm 6 years old, so my mind is blown. This is via satellite, right? And you see this old man, this giant old man with white hair, and he's looking down on little 6-year-old me, and he says, next to the sin of murder comes the sin of sexual impurity, homosexuality. And I was terrified because I already had a huge crush on the boy right down the block. And I thought, really? So I'm down there with all the sinners and the murderers and the rapists, all 3'4" of me. And if that wasn't bad enough, a few months later, my good Mormon missionary father decides he's going to take off and never be heard from again. He split. And I was left with my good Mormon mother, who has had braces and crutches since she was 7 years old from polio. And now she's got 3 little boys to raise, and she's never driven a car. She's never had a job. And the only people that said, hey, we'll help is the U.S. Army, because we're in San Antonio, Texas. And the U.S. Army said, we will help you, ma'am. We will give you the skills to make the money to raise these boys. So all of a sudden, I'm not just Mormon and in Texas, but I'm a military brat with a really, really big secret. And so flash forward to me in college, and I'm coming home. I'm driving to LAX, and I get into the plane, and I'm very anxious, and I put on the seatbelt, and I'm thinking, what am I going to talk about at Christmas this year? You know, because a lot's changed since I was that little kid. I actually had this great stroke of luck. My mom remarried a Catholic Army soldier when I was 13 years old, and he had orders to ship off to Central California. So all of a sudden, I'm meeting gay and lesbian people, and they don't have horns, and they seem to be having a fine time of it. They don't seem depressed, and I go down to Los Angeles to college, to UCLA, and I meet more gay and lesbian people. And I'm not saying it was easy. This is still the early 90s. It was still tough, but I had people. I had support. And I went to West Hollywood, and I met my tribe. And I thought, come on, right? Some of you are here tonight. And I also met this young man who was much, much older than me. He was 22 and a grad student. And I had my first crush. But I'm on my flight home. My family's now in Virginia at this point. I'm on my flight home, and I'm thinking, I can't tell him about this crush. I can't tell him about any of these things. What am I going to talk about? What am I going to do? And the plane lands, and I haven't figured that out. And my stepdad picks me up from the airport, and he drives me through the woods out into rural Virginia, and I open the front door, and there's my beautiful mom, and she's looking at me. And I know she's so proud of the son that she doesn't really know. And there's my brother standing next to her, and it's my big macho brother, my older brother. You know, this brother of mine is an auto mechanic. He loves NASCAR. He loves to shoot animals for fun. He was the first person ever to smoke in my family or drink in my family or try drugs in my family. And he tried to teach me how to be tough. He did. He tried to teach me by playing me Megadeth and Metallica and introducing me to punk rock. And I just kept putting up my New Kids on the Block poster. He said, no, and so I put up a Paula Abdul poster. Is that Butch? No. And it was just like we were growing apart. And we were so very, very different. It was like oil and water, and I wondered if my brother and my mother, if they'd ever love me, for who I was. And, so Christmas morning comes, and we open up presents, and dinner comes, and we all eat, and I eat really quickly, and I'm like, I am exhausted from travel. I have to go upstairs and go to bed. And I rush upstairs, and I close the door, and I'm so pleased I did it. We didn't have to talk about anything. And then I hear this sound, this click-clack sound down the hallway, click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. I'd heard it my entire life. It was my mom on her braces and crutches, and she was coming down the hallway. And she opens my door, and she sits down in the corner of my bed, and this actually wasn't unusual at all. It's what we always did. It was our thing. We would sit up all night and talk. We would talk politics and current events. That was our favorite thing to talk about at the time. But you know what? She didn't know she had a gay son, but what the headlines were filled with at the time was this thing called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And she was angry as an army woman. She was like, how dare they give gay and lesbian people any access to the military? How dare they let them in with this sinful lifestyle choice? They shouldn't be allowed in the military. They shouldn't be allowed anywhere. And she looked down at me, and I was sitting there on the ground, and there was just tears streaming down my face. And I wanted them so badly to go away and to go back in. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to come out to my mom. I didn't want to tell her. And I looked in her eyes, and I could tell she was devastated. She was heartbroken because she thought, she had done something wrong. She had broken her son, and there was something incredibly damaged about me, and she didn't know how to fix me. And we didn't resolve it on that trip. I went home with this hole in my heart, and I got back to LA, and I thought, how are we going to deal with this? Because she's coming out to LA in just a few months for my college graduation. And a bunch of my friends said, oh, what's the problem? We'll make a dinner. We'll make some salad. We'll make some pasta. We'll have her over. It'll be great. And I was like, oh, okay. And that day came sooner than I thought. And all my friends started coming over, and they started making their pastas and making their salads. And I got to admit something to you. I completely copped out. I didn't tell any of my friends that my mom was homophobic. I didn't tell any of my friends that she didn't really like gay people or understand gay people, and she certainly did not approve of her son being gay. I also didn't tell my mom that most of my friends were now gay or lesbian. So I hear that sound coming, that click-clack, click-clack, click-clack down the hallway, and she walks in, and she comes in, she sits down on the couch, and I sort of back into the kitchen, and I watch all my friends start bringing her salads and pastas, and they're delivering them to her, and I'm watching her reaction, and she's figuring it out pretty quickly. And then one goes and sits down right next to her and starts to talk to her, and I have this horrifying revelation. I'm like, because I've said nothing, they assume my mom likes gay people. They assume my mom approves of me, and this is before Ellen. This is before Will and Grace. So they think she's like a saint. Like she loves her gay son, and so they start telling her stories. They start telling her about their dating life and their sex life and things I would never tell my mother. And then they start telling her about what it was like to grow up gay and to come out to their families and the rejection they experienced. And then that feeling of feeling less than, because that's what you're told your whole life, that you're less than, you're not good enough. And the depression that followed that. And I watched one by one as these people told my mom these stories. And one by one, they started to leave. And before I knew it, I was all alone with my mother there. And she patted the couch next to her, and I was quite afraid. And I go and I sit down next to her, and she's like, well, I really like your friends. I was like, yeah, I really like them too. And she's like, I met that one. There was a certain one, there was a 22-year-old grad student. I said, yeah, I know him. And she said, well, I like him. But, he damn sure had better start treating you better. And when he takes you to dinner, he should pay. And she wrapped her arms around me, and she held me. And it was literally the first time that I knew that she truly loved me for me, the authentic me. It had literally taken one night. It had taken that one night at dinner, meeting actual gay and lesbian people, hearing their real stories. Just one night, and all of a sudden, all these myths and stereotypes and lies that I had heard and she had heard growing up in the military and growing up out in Texas and hearing it from our church, that just melted away. It went away in one night because they told their coming out stories. My mom got it, and it was so empowering, and I was so filled with love. And I was so empowered that I said, what, I'm graduating from college. I'm going to start telling gay stories. And no matter what it was a gay story. If it was a reality show, it was a coming out episode. If it was, a TV movie, it was about Pedro Zamora. And within 10 years, I was getting to tell the story of my great hero, Harvey Milk. The guy who came up with the idea of coming out for political gain, to spread hope, and most importantly, for that feeling of liberation that it gives you, that feeling of liberation that it had given me with my mom, that feeling of hope. And I was so damn proud of myself. I was so pleased with myself. And I was so busy up in San Francisco making sure this movie got done right that I was just ignoring all of my phone messages and emails. And there was one person in particular who was relentless, and it was my older brother, and he kept leaving me messages, and I kept ignoring them. And, he and I had just continued to grow further and further and further apart. And he had this addiction problem. And that had gotten worse and worse and worse. And if you've ever spent some time with an addict, it becomes harder and harder to have those conversations with him. But I did. I finally returned his phone call, and I could hear it in his voice. It was just trembling, and he was having a really hard time. And I said, bro, Marcus, hey, what is it? What's wrong? Did you get somebody pregnant? Whatever it is, we can make it better. And he said, no, man. Do you remember Larry? I said, Larry, yeah, he's the guy with no tooth, and you guys like watching cars go in circles and killing things for fun. And he said, yeah, Larry. And I said, well, what's up? And he said, well, Larry broke up with me. I said, what? And he said, yeah, dude, so a year ago, me and Larry were down in the basement, and it's something I'd been thinking about for a really long time. And it's something I think he'd been thinking about for a really long time, too. And we kissed, and I really liked it, and so did he, and it's kind of felt like the most right thing that's ever happened in my whole life, and we fell in love, and I've never felt so good about it, but, he's really afraid. And I'm really afraid. But he's so afraid, he says, it's got to stop now. And so he broke up with me. And I could hear the sound of devastation in his voice. He wasn't feeling liberated. He had just come out, but he wasn't feeling hopeful. So I was like, oh, all right. I whipped out every hope speech I had. I whipped out every it gets better speech I had, and I handed it to him. And still there was nothing. There was no sound of liberation. There was still no sound of hope, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. What a jerk I had been. How self-centered I had been, that I had missed it. Of course I felt hope. Of course I felt liberation when I came out. I came out in California. He came out in Texas, in Virginia. That's where he grew up. He grew up in states where the government makes sure that you know that if you come out, they can still take away your job and they can still take away your home. So no one's coming out in his world. They're not dispelling myths and stereotypes in his world and the groups that he holds so dear. So he has every reason to be afraid. He has so much to lose still. And it broke my heart. And so a few months later, I had the great honor of getting up on that Oscar stage and winning the Academy Award for having written Milk. And, I got up there and I said something that really kind of pissed off a lot of gay and lesbian activists. And I said, it's time for us to take this movement federal, so that if we win something out here in California, it applies to my brother in Virginia, so that I don't live in one nation that's actually two countries where I can feel liberated and my brother from the same family can feel so afraid. And when I got off that stage, I got a lot of heat from gay and lesbian activists who said, it's too soon. But I also met some really smart people, some people much smarter than me, who knew how to sue the state of California in federal court, and that's exactly what we did. And if you're paying attention recently, you know that we won one of the greatest battles in the step towards full equality at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals recently. And that's how I felt. I felt so jubilant, and the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to run to the phone, and I wanted to call my brother and say, hey, bro, we did it. There is one more step until we have full equality, until we get to the U.S. Supreme Court, and my win is your win. And you can feel like I did when I came out. I wanted to make that phone call. But 2 weeks before, my big brother lost his fight with addiction. And he died. And he will never know that feeling of hope that I felt. He will never know that liberation that I felt. So I know I gotta keep on splitting my time between movies and fighting. And it's not just some idea, and it's not just some ideal anymore. This is truly for my big brother. And all the people out there tonight who are still like my big brother, so that they can love while they still have their lives to live. Thank you.